Hello friends, I hope you're all doing well. Today's story is about a shocking murder that has remained unsolved for 72 years. Despite decades of investigation, the police are still searching for the real killer. Many detectives, officers, and even the FBI tried to crack the case, but the mystery only deepened. It was the morning of January 15, 1947, a seemingly ordinary day in Los Angeles. The sun's faint rays struggled to warm the cold winter air. People were busy with their daily routines, unaware that this day would uncover one of the most mysterious and gruesome crimes in history. At 10 a.m., a woman named Betty Bersinger was walking through Leimert Park with her 3-year-old daughter. It was a usual stroll for her, but something unusual caught her attention near the bushes. She stopped. At first, she couldn't quite understand what she was looking at. But as she stepped closer, her heart started pounding in terror. Lying in the grass was a young woman's body, but this was no ordinary crime scene. A corpse in 2 pieces. The woman let out a piercing scream. The body was severed into 2 halves, with the upper torso lying a few inches away from the lower half. But the most horrifying detail was that there was no blood anywhere around it. The clean separation of the body was eerily precise, almost as if it had been surgically done. Betty grabbed her daughter's hand and ran to the nearest house. With shaking hands, she called the police. Within minutes, the Los Angeles Police Department (LAPD) arrived at the scene. Officers and detectives gathered around, unable to believe what they were seeing. A disturbing sight. The victim was a young woman in her early 20s, completely naked. Her face had been mutilated, with deep cuts extending from the corners of her mouth to her ears, resembling a grotesque smile. There were multiple small cuts on her body, and a chunk of flesh had been removed from her thigh, possibly to erase a tattoo. The corpse had been completely drained of blood and then thoroughly washed, making it difficult to find any forensic evidence. Who could have done something this horrific? And why? The investigation begins. The police knew they were dealing with something much more sinister than a regular homicide. The precise cuts and methodical disposal of the body suggested that the killer might be a doctor or a skilled surgeon. The first challenge was to identify the victim. Fortunately, this did not take long. Within an hour, police matched the victim's fingerprints to Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old aspiring actress. Elizabeth had once applied for a job in a military office, and in 1943, she had been arrested for underage drinking at the age of 19. Because of this, her fingerprints were already in police records. As soon as the identity was confirmed, the news spread like wildfire. The Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short was a stunningly beautiful woman. She often wore a black flower in her hair, and soon, newspapers gave her a nickname, the Black Dahlia. For the next 4 months, her case dominated the front pages of every major newspaper in America. The gruesome details of her murder horrified the nation. But the biggest question remained: who killed Elizabeth Short, and why? A killer in the shadows. As the LAPD launched a massive investigation, the case took an even stranger turn. Dozens of people started coming forward, falsely confessing to the murder. But as detectives dug deeper, the truth became even darker. Who was the real killer? Was it someone Elizabeth knew? Or was it a random act of unspeakable cruelty? The answers were hidden in the shadows, and the mystery was just beginning. The murder of Elizabeth Short, now infamously known as the Black Dahlia, sent shockwaves through Los Angeles. Her brutalized body, found in Leimert Park, had been cut cleanly in half, drained of blood, and washed, leaving behind a terrifying mystery. Who could have done something so monstrous? As the Los Angeles Police Department (LAPD) launched its investigation, reporters swarmed the crime scene. The press sensationalized every detail, turning Elizabeth into an overnight legend. But behind the headlines, detectives were working tirelessly to uncover the truth. A crime without evidence. The first challenge investigators faced was the lack of physical evidence. The killer had taken extreme care to leave no fingerprints, blood, or clues at the scene. The body had been dumped in an empty lot, meaning there were no eyewitnesses to the crime itself. Detectives had only one lead: Elizabeth herself. Who was she? Who were her friends, enemies, lovers? If they could retrace her last steps, maybe they could find her killer. Who was Elizabeth Short? Elizabeth was an aspiring actress from Medford, Massachusetts. She had come to Los Angeles like so many others, dreaming of fame, fortune, and a life in Hollywood. But instead of landing roles in movies, she struggled to make ends meet. She waitressed, stayed with friends, and dated multiple men, hoping one of them might help her get into the film industry. Many described her as beautiful and mysterious, always dressed in black, with dark curls framing her pale face. But beneath her striking appearance, Elizabeth had secrets. Detectives soon learned she had been living a transient lifestyle, moving from place to place, often relying on men to support her financially. The last sightings. To solve a murder, investigators must answer a crucial question. What happened in the victim's final hours? The last confirmed sighting of Elizabeth Short was on January 9, 1947, 6 days before her body was discovered. She had been seen at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She had told friends she was meeting a mystery man. After that, she vanished. Where had she gone? Who was she with? The first suspects. With no immediate leads, detectives began questioning Elizabeth's past lovers. There were many, but a few stood out as potential suspects. 1. Red Manley, a married salesman who had been with Elizabeth just days before her disappearance. He was the last person confirmed to have seen her alive. 2. Mark Hansen, a wealthy nightclub owner who had allowed Elizabeth to stay at his house. He later claimed he had been romantically interested in her, but she had rejected him. 3. Dr. George Hodel, a well-connected doctor with a dark past. Rumors swirled that he had an obsession with bizarre medical procedures. Each of these men had motives, but none had concrete evidence tying them to the murder. The letter from the killer. Just when the investigation seemed to hit a dead end, something chilling happened. On January 23, 1947, the Los Angeles Examiner newspaper received an envelope with an anonymous letter inside. The letter was made from cut-out words from magazines, like something out of a detective novel. It read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." Inside the envelope were Elizabeth Short's personal items, her birth certificate, business cards, and photographs. This meant only one thing. The killer was taunting the police. But who was he, and why was he playing this terrifying game? Theories and dead ends. Over the next few weeks, the LAPD received over 60 false confessions. People, either desperate for attention or genuinely disturbed, came forward claiming they had murdered Elizabeth. Each confession wasted police time, pulling them further away from the real killer. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the body again. The surgical precision of the cuts suggested the killer had medical knowledge. This led detectives to investigate doctors and surgeons in Los Angeles. One name kept coming up: George Hodel, a doctor with dark secrets. Dr. George Hodel was a respected physician, but behind closed doors, he was a man with a twisted mind. Rumors surrounded him: strange parties, disturbing sexual practices, and a fascination with surrealist art, particularly the grotesque works of Salvador Dali and Man Ray. Some of these paintings depicted dissected bodies posed in eerie ways, just like how Elizabeth Short had been found. One of his own family members later claimed that Hodel had been obsessed with Elizabeth. But the police never had enough evidence to arrest him. Hodel eventually left the country, and though he was never convicted, many believe he was the true killer of the Black Dahlia. The case grows colder. Months passed, then years. The investigation stalled. The newspapers stopped printing headlines about the Black Dahlia, and new crimes took over the front pages. But the mystery never faded. Even decades later, detectives, historians, and amateur sleuths have continued to search for the truth. Did George Hodel kill Elizabeth Short? Or was the real killer someone else, lurking in the shadows, escaping justice forever? A case that refused to die. By the time 1947 turned into 1948, the Black Dahlia case was growing colder. Detectives had interviewed hundreds of suspects, investigated every lead, and followed every possible trail. Yet, the identity of the killer remained a haunting mystery. The newspapers stopped printing daily updates, and the public's attention shifted to new crimes, Hollywood scandals, and political drama. But for the detectives who had worked on the case, and for Elizabeth Short's grieving family, the nightmare was far from over. Who had killed Elizabeth? And why had he, or she, never been caught? Theories that refused to die. Over the years, several major theories emerged about the identity of the Black Dahlia's killer. While dozens of names surfaced, a few stood out as the most chilling possibilities. Each suspect had their own motive, opportunity, and dark secrets. Suspect 1. George Hodel, the doctor with a sinister past. Among all the names linked to the case, George Hodel remained the most disturbing. Hodel was a wealthy, highly intelligent doctor who had once run a medical clinic in Los Angeles. He had connections to powerful people in the city, including police officers, politicians, and Hollywood elites. But beneath his charming public persona, George Hodel was a deeply disturbed man. Evidence against Hodel. 1. Medical knowledge. The precise manner in which Elizabeth's body had been cut and drained of blood suggested surgical expertise. Hodel, as a doctor, had the skills necessary to perform such a procedure. 2. His house was bugged. Years later, Hodel's own son, former LAPD homicide detective Steve Hodel, investigated his father. He discovered that the LAPD had once placed listening devices in Hodel's house. One chilling recording captured George Hodel saying, "Supposin' I did kill the Black Dahlia. They can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." 3. Connections to surrealist art. Hodel was known to be obsessed with the bizarre and grotesque art of Salvador Dali and Man Ray. Some of these artworks resembled the way Elizabeth's body had been positioned. Despite this mountain of circumstantial evidence, the police never arrested Hodel. Why? Many believe that because he had deep ties with the LAPD and powerful figures in Los Angeles, he was protected. In 1950, Hodel suddenly left the United States, moving to the Philippines. For some, this was a sign of guilt. Had he fled to avoid justice? Suspect 2. Leslie Dillon, the man who knew too much. Another disturbing suspect was a man named Leslie Dillon. Dillon was a bellhop and aspiring writer, but he had an unusual obsession. He was fascinated with crime and murder. In 1948, he wrote a detailed letter to the LAPD, claiming that he knew who killed Elizabeth Short. Dillon told detectives that the real killer was a man named Jeff Connors, an alleged criminal with a history of violence against women. But as detectives pressed him for more details, they noticed something unsettling. Dillon seemed to know too much about the case. He described the wounds on Elizabeth's body in extreme detail, details that had never been publicly released. How did he know these things? Did he kill her himself? Or was he somehow connected to the real killer? The LAPD's secret investigation. Suspicious of Dillon, LAPD officers held him for questioning in a secret hotel room for several days. They pushed him for answers. Was he confessing to the murder in a roundabout way? But before they could break him, Dillon suddenly stopped talking. And then, something shocking happened. Dillon filed a lawsuit against the LAPD, claiming they had kidnapped and tortured him. The department quickly released him, and soon after, all interest in Dillon as a suspect disappeared. Had the police been onto something? Or had they targeted the wrong man? Other chilling suspects. Several other names appeared in police reports over the years. Walter Bailey, a retired surgeon who lived near where Elizabeth's body was found. His family claimed he had a violent streak. Mark Hansen, the nightclub owner who had allowed Elizabeth to stay in his home. One of her last known belongings, an address book, had his name embossed on it. An unknown serial killer. Some believe Elizabeth's murder was the work of a serial killer who was never caught. The brutal, almost ritualistic nature of the crime suggested someone with experience killing before. A cover-up? One of the most controversial theories about the case is that the police knew who the killer was but covered it up. The LAPD was known to be corrupt in the 1940s and 50s. Many of its officers had ties to organized crime, Hollywood elites, and wealthy figures like Dr. George Hodel. Some believe that Hodel was protected by the police because he had dirt on high-ranking officials. Others think that the investigation was sabotaged from the inside, allowing the real killer to walk free. Could it be that justice was never served because someone powerful didn't want the truth to come out? The mystery lives on even though decades have passed. The Black Dahlia case remains unsolved. Books, movies, and documentaries continue to explore the chilling details, with many modern detectives and crime experts convinced that the truth is buried in LAPD files. In 2003, Steve Hodel, George Hodel's own son, published a book claiming that his father was the true killer. The evidence he provided was compelling. But without DNA proof or a confession, the case remains open-ended. Will we ever know the truth? The Black Dahlia case isn't just a murder mystery. It's a legend, a symbol of Hollywood's dark underbelly, and a reminder that some crimes are never truly solved. Somewhere, the real killer may have taken their secret to the grave. Or perhaps, in the dusty archives of the LAPD, the answer has been sitting there for years, just waiting to be discovered. A crime that refused to be forgotten. The Black Dahlia murder wasn't just another crime in Los Angeles' long history of violence. It became a legend, a terrifying story whispered in bars, investigated by amateur sleuths, and reopened time and time again by detectives, journalists, and conspiracy theorists. Elizabeth Short's tragic fate exposed the hidden darkness of Hollywood, the illusion of fame, the dangers of chasing stardom, and the powerful men who controlled everything. Even after decades of failed investigations, the Black Dahlia case still haunts the city. Why? Because it represents a question with no answer. And perhaps, the most chilling thought of all, someone got away with it. A Hollywood crime, more than just a murder. The location of the crime, the nature of the killing, and Elizabeth Short's connections to the entertainment world have led some to believe that her death was not a random act of violence. Many think Hollywood itself was responsible. But how? The industry that used and destroyed young women. Hollywood in the 1940s was not as glamorous as it appeared. Beneath the shimmering lights and dazzling movie premieres, a dark reality lurked. Women were lured to Los Angeles with the promise of fame but often ended up as exploited victims. Powerful men, directors, producers, and nightclub owners, controlled who made it in the industry. Many young actresses were forced into dangerous situations, where they had to trade their dignity for a chance at stardom. Was Elizabeth another victim of this ruthless system? Had she trusted the wrong man, one who promised her a career but instead led her to her death? The role of organized crime. Another theory suggests that organized crime had a hand in the Black Dahlia's murder. During the 1940s, the mob had a powerful grip on Hollywood. They controlled nightclubs, movie theaters, and even had police officers on their payroll. Elizabeth had been connected to several nightclubs owned by known criminals. Was she involved with someone dangerous? Did she witness something she shouldn't have? Or did she cross paths with a mobster who decided she needed to be silenced? The strange disappearances of key witnesses. Over the years, several people who had information about the case mysteriously vanished or died under suspicious circumstances. Jean Spengler, an aspiring actress who disappeared in 1949. Before vanishing, she had told friends she was meeting a drive Scott for a mysterious medical procedure. Some believe she knew what really happened to Elizabeth. A woman named Anne, a witness who claimed she had seen Elizabeth with a mystery man days before her death. She later disappeared, and her statements were removed from police records. The Dahlia Avenger, an unknown informant, sent police anonymous letters claiming they knew who the killer was. But before they could reveal more, they stopped writing, and were never heard from again. Were these people silenced to keep the truth buried? Or were their deaths just coincidences in a city filled with secrets? The chilling copycat killings. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Black Dahlia case is that similar murders happened afterward. Women's bodies were found mutilated, drained of blood, and posed in eerie ways, just like Elizabeth Short. The Cleveland Torso Murders, a series of gruesome killings between the 1930s and 1940s, where victims were dismembered with surgical precision. Some believe Elizabeth's killer may have been connected to these crimes. The Lipstick Murders, a case in Chicago where a woman was found murdered with a message scrawled in lipstick on the wall. The 1947 Chicago case, just months after Elizabeth's murder, another young woman was found cut in half, her body eerily resembling Elizabeth's. Could this mean that Elizabeth's murderer was a serial killer who was never caught? Or had the Black Dahlia case inspired other killers to commit equally horrifying crimes? The unsolved mystery, who really killed Elizabeth Short? After all these years, the biggest question remains. Who was the Black Dahlia's killer? Despite countless theories, books, and investigations, no one has been able to prove with 100% certainty who did it. Some believe the answer is hidden in old police files, buried under years of corruption and cover-ups. Others think that the truth was lost when the real killer took their secret to the grave. Even today, modern detectives, amateur sleuths, and crime enthusiasts continue digging for the truth. Hollywood's haunted ghost, why the Black Dahlia still matters today. Elizabeth Short's story isn't just a true crime case, it's a warning. It's a reminder that behind every dream, every ambition, and every bright light in Hollywood, there is a shadow. Her case continues to inspire. Movies, films like L.A. Confidential and The Black Dahlia draw heavily from the case. Books, crime authors still publish new theories and shocking revelations. Conspiracies, online forums and true crime podcasts keep investigating, hoping to find the missing piece of the puzzle. But perhaps the most tragic part of the story is that Elizabeth Short never got the fame she dreamed of, only infamy. Her face became immortalized, but not in the way she had hoped. Will we ever know the truth? So, will the Black Dahlia case ever be solved? Some say yes. New forensic technologies, DNA testing, and AI-powered crime analysis may one day uncover the killer's identity. Others say no. Too much time has passed. The key witnesses are dead. The evidence has been lost or destroyed. And whoever killed Elizabeth was likely never meant to be caught. But one thing is certain. The Black Dahlia story will never fade away. It will forever be one of Hollywood's darkest and most terrifying mysteries. A tale of beauty, ambition, and horror. And a case that will continue haunting Los Angeles forever. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next mystery. See you in the next one. Stay curious, stay safe.